wisdom and compassion is a bit unusual for someone with corporate background. And my connection with this started a few years back. Wisdom is about intelligence, it's about knowledge and experience, judgment, and compassion is that feeling or motivation to understand the suffering of others and do something about it. But there is a word that I wasn't aware of till a few years back, which is sentience. Sentience means the ability to perceive or the ability to feel as distinct from the ability to think. And I discovered that non-human animals are also sentient beings like us. They are social, they have emotions, they feel pleasure and pain, and they also mourn the loss of near and dear ones. And what you see on the screen is a powerful example of that. And there is this beautiful quote from 18th century British philosopher Jeremy Bentham. The question is not can they reason, nor can they talk. The question is, can they suffer? And this is something that I learned just a few years back. And when I learned that, it opened a new door of awareness into a new world of sentient beings. And as we grow up, we are made to believe that human species are superior to other species, that we are at the top of a pyramid, that we are conscious, they are not, we have a soul, they don't. But now there is research which is emerging where scientists are accepting that animals are also conscious. Richard Dawkins, who is a very famous evolutionary biologist, actually says that if you take two species, if you take Parag and you take a pig, and you start putting our ancestors on a line, one on top of another, and you go back thousands of years, for any two species, two lines will actually meet, which means that we have a common ancestor. The source of life is one. And this is something that I think we all need to acknowledge. The reality, however, I showed you two videos of playful actions by a couple of animals, but the reality on the ground is actually very different because we use the animals as commodities for various purposes. And over the centuries, this is not something that has happened in the last 5 or 10 years. Over the centuries, the use of animals has actually become normalized. For example, as a consumer, I never knew the nice leather that is there on my car seat cover with a natural feel, how is that manufactured? I did not know the medicines that I am taking, how are they tested on animals? Or the milk that goes into my favorite Bengali sweets, how is that produced? So the reality is that over the centuries, this has become acceptable, it has become normalized, and as consumers, we are not aware of what lies behind the products and services that we are consuming. And this leads to a cycle of pain and fear. It leads to a commodification of animals. They are bought and sold. And there are times when the machine which is used to make the use of an animal is actually more valuable than the life of a sentient being. And this leads to all kinds of practices, confinement, and so on. And this is largely invisible. 95% of the people are not aware about this, and we need to do something about the level of awareness. A few examples of what they go through at an individual level, but if you look at the scale, that's also very, very large. There are billions and millions of animals which are used for consumption, which are used for testing in drugs. As working animals in Badrinath and Kedarnath, we ride on them when we go to these touristic places, and for testing on chemicals and drugs, and of course on the streets. Now, the thing is that it's not even just about the animals. Even if we keep ethics and compassion aside for a minute, the fact is it's also hurting the planet, and it's also hurting our health. It is now well established, well documented by multiple organizations globally that somewhere between 15 to 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions that is leading to global warming is actually coming from animal agriculture. and there is massive overuse of land and water, for example. If you look at the drug testing process, only 5% of the drugs which are tested on animals actually make it to become an effective drug for which that all of us use. And this process of testing drugs on animals makes the whole process more expensive and takes a lot more time. It takes $2 billion to develop a single drug. And there are technologies which are emerging to replace this, and I will talk about that in a minute. And then if you look at the antimicrobial crisis, the AMR crisis which is developing, you might be aware of that. We are becoming resistant to antibiotics. 2/3 of the antibiotics are actually used on animals, and we ingest those antibiotics through the animals. And then comes the zoonotic diseases, the diseases that are coming from non-human species, and they're coming to us, whether it's a bird flu or a swine flu or COVID. And the frequency of these is actually increasing. We don't notice it because they are coming after a few years. But if you plot the frequency of these, the frequency is actually increasing. So therefore, the point that I'm making is that it's not just about compassion. It is all interconnected. It is about human welfare as well as animal well-being. So you might ask a question, you know, I've told you about the problem. Does a solution really exist? Or has this become so deeply ingrained, deeply embedded in our society that nothing can be done about it? Actually, I'm very optimistic. I believe that solutions exist, and there are 3 things that need to be done concurrently. The first is that science and technology is leading to discovery of new technologies that can replace animals in our society. The second thing we need to do is we need to have policy, both public policy and private policy, to ensure dignity to the animals till such time technology replaces, because it's going to take years and in some cases decades before the technology scales up. And thirdly, which is probably the most important, it is to do with awareness. It is to do with behavior change. So let me first pick up on the technology part. There are a number of emerging technologies which are coming up which can replace animals. The first example would be we consume animals for food, as food, and this has been for various reasons, you know, habitual, cultural, religious, and so on. But there are plant-based proteins which are coming up, plant-based alternatives. There are new technologies like biomass fermentation and cultivated meat which are coming up. Cultivated meat is a technology where you take cells from an animal and you actually take it to the lab, and using reactors, you can grow these cells into millions of tons of meat. That's called cultivated meat. It has been approved in 3 countries, in the US, Singapore, and Israel. And this is a technology that needs to be scaled up. The second example I would take is my favorite, which is drug testing on animals. Last year, US FDA approved FDA Modernization Act, in which they have allowed for the first time use of non-animal models. European Union has also approved it, and our own country, about 9 months back in India, we have actually approved an amendment in the clinical trial rules to allow non-animal models. And I'm proud to say that my company, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, is taking a lead in this area, and we are starting a major research project with top scientists to prepare a roadmap for transition from animal testing to non-animal models. So there are technologies which are now beginning to emerge that can replace animals. But we can also take a wrong turn. You know, there is this beautiful quote from Krishnamurti: intelligence without love is not intelligence. So we have brilliant scientists, and I'm sure we can find solutions for most of the problems in the world. But if we are going to look at the problems only from our own lens, from the lens of human species, and we are going to ignore the environment, and we are going to ignore the planet and other species, then we will not find the right solutions. We will actually create problems for the future. And this is a headline that I had seen, you know, in Nature magazine. So we can start extracting protein through snake farming. And also there are things that we are doing. We want to make sure that we can embed chips, for example, in our brains, and there is some invasive experimentation that is being done. So the point I want to make here is that if we are going to use only intelligence without compassion, then I think we are going to find the wrong solutions. So that's about the technology. The second thing is in terms of policy. Till such time these technologies are scaled up and they are adopted, we need policy interventions. And there are policy interventions which are already happening. For example, this is an example where the judiciary stepped in to actually take a look at whether the food is safe, whether it's hygienic, are the environmental laws being met, are the animal welfare standards being met. So this is one example. The second example is a corporate example of private policy. More than 2,500 companies in the world have made commitments to move towards cage-free eggs. The birds which lay eggs, they spend their entire life in a battery cage where they cannot even spread their wings. So it is like, it's equivalent to if I spend my life in a cage where I cannot even spread my hands. That's what they go through for their entire life. And companies are now moving to cage-free eggs. And in India also, we are working with a number of companies to make commitments and move in that direction. And then there are gestation crates where female pigs are kept so that they can't move. 22 states in India have banned it. Enforcement is still to be done. But these are examples of policy interventions which are needed to make sure that we strike a balance between human welfare and animal welfare. Now, the most important part is actually behavior change. All of us sitting in this room and outside this room can actually make an impact in this. And I think the first thing that we need to do is that we need to become a conscious consumer, a mindful consumer. We need to understand, we need to research, we need to Google and understand and read what is the impact of what we are consuming on the planet, on the environment, and on our own health. To take an example, if I move to a plant-based diet, it leads to 70% less water consumption. It leads to more than 80% less use of land, and therefore it means less deforestation, and so on. I am not asking anyone to change their diet tomorrow morning. All I am saying is that all of us need to become aware. We need to become conscious of the impact of what we are consuming. And it's not just about the animals. We must, for example, start reducing the use of single-use plastic. And there are many more things where we can actually make an impact by becoming a mindful consumer. The second thing is to choose action over apathy. For 90% of my life, I was actually indifferent. But once the door of awareness opened, then I decided that yes, I should do something about it, I should speak up. So if we see something where harm is being done to another human being or to a non-human species, we should speak up. We should choose action over apathy. And I do feel personally very optimistic. I believe that human consciousness, human awareness is expanding. The change, when we go through change in society, it does not become apparent. But when you step back and take a look at over 100 years, then it becomes apparent as to what is the quantum of change that we are going through. For example, just 100 years back, there was human slavery. It's unthinkable now, right? Just about 50 years back, women could not vote in many countries, and now gender equality is everywhere, diversity. I have worked in so many large companies. Gender equality and diversity is being discussed in every single boardroom. If you look at LGBTQ, it was, some time back it was called a mental illness, but now our awareness is expanding. And I believe that the next frontier is where our awareness, our consciousness is now gradually expanding to include non-human species also. This is the next frontier of social justice. And I would like you to remember two things from this talk today. The first is non-human animals are also sentient beings. And the second is that all of us have a responsibility to be a conscious consumer and to choose action over apathy. I believe that wisdom with compassion can actually change the world. Thank you.